The old station stood like a forgotten giant at the edge of town. Locals called it Whisperwind Station, though no trains had stopped there in nearly 50 years. Alex, a boy of 10 with a mop of brown hair and eyes that held 1,000 questions, was the only one who truly visited. He didn't go inside, not usually. It was mostly just sitting on the overgrown platform, imagining. Alex loved history. Not the dates and battles in textbooks, but the stories. The lives lived, the secrets whispered, the echoes of laughter and tears. His grandfather, Old Man Tiber, had been the best storyteller in the world, at least according to Alex. Tiber had filled his head with tales of knights and dragons, pharaohs and pirates. Now Tiber was gone, and the stories felt quieter. Tonight, though, was different. A thick mist clung to the rails, swirling like ghostly ribbons. Alex shivered, not entirely from the cold. Old Man Hemlock, the grumpy neighbor who always complained about Alex's loitering, had warned him about Whisperwind Station. "Strange things happen there, boy," he'd rasped, "things best left undisturbed." Alex hadn't listened then, and he wasn't listening now. Then, a light.
Soft, golden glow-cutting Truxemist.
It grew, resolving into the shape of a train. Not a modern, sleek machine, but something ornate. Brass gleamed even through the fog, and the carriages were carved with swirling patterns he'd only seen in history books. It wasn't just a train, it was a moving piece of another time. The train slowed, hissing steam, and glided to a stop with a gentle shudder. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the drip of moisture from the eaves of the decaying station roof. Alex's heart hammered against his ribs. Should he run? Should he tell someone? Curiosity, that relentless engine within him, won. He cautiously approached the train, his sneakers crunching on the gravel. The door to the nearest carriage was open. He hesitated, then stepped inside. The interior was even more astonishing than the exterior. Velvet seats, polished wood, and lamps that cast a warm, inviting glow. But it was empty. Completely empty. "Well now, aren't you a curious one?" Alex jumped, spinning around. Standing in the doorway was a man, tall and slender, with a kind face framed by a neatly trimmed beard. He wore a dark blue uniform and a cap with a gold emblem.
Conductor.
I didn't think anyone was here," Alex stammered. The conductor chuckled, a warm, comforting sound. "Most people don't find their way here. This train doesn't exactly advertise its arrival." He extended a hand. "Name's Mr. Finch."
"And you are?"
"Alex," he replied, shaking Mr. Finch's hand. "But where is everyone?" Mr. Finch smiled. "This train doesn't carry passengers to places, Alex. It carries them to times. And right now, it seems to have found someone who's ready for a journey. Backwards."
Alex blinked, confused.
"Backwards? What do you mean?" "This, my boy," Mr. Finch said, gesturing around the opulent carriage, "is the Kronos Express. It travels not through space, but through time. And it only goes one way, the way things used to be." The train lurched, not with the smooth glide of modern travel, but with a shuddering groan that rattled the windows. The opulent interior of the Kronos Express seemed to ripple, the polished wood momentarily blurring as if viewed through water. When Alex could focus again, the world outside was impossible.
Gone was the Overground Station, the familiar scent of damp earth and decaying wood.
Instead, a humid, thick air filled the carriage, heavy with the smell of ferns and something ancient, earthy, and wild. Towering trees, unlike anything he'd ever seen, scraped the sky. And in the distance, a mountain range pierced the clouds, shrouded in mist. "Welcome," Mr. Finch said, his voice calm amidst Alex's stunned silence, "to the Cretaceous period. Approximately 70 million years ago." Alex's jaw dropped. He stumbled to the window, pressing his face against the cool glass. The landscape teemed with life. Giant ferns unfurled like prehistoric umbrellas, and strange, colorful plants bloomed in vibrant clusters. But it wasn't the flora that stole his breath. It was the fauna. A long-necked brachiosaurus munched on leaves, its head disappearing into the canopy. A triceratops lumbered through a clearing, its frill a shield of bone. And then, a flash of scales and teeth. A Tyrannosaurus rex, thankfully distant, but undeniably terrifying. This is incredible, Alex breathed, his voice barely a whisper. Fear warred with awe, a dizzying combination. Indeed, Mr. Finch replied, a twinkle in his eye. But remember, Alex, observation is key. And respect. This isn't a museum.
This is a living, breathing world. Von wer you are the stranger.
Heeding the conductor's words, Alex stayed close to the train, venturing out only onto the small platform that extended from the carriage door. The air was stifling, buzzing with insects he couldn't identify. Every rustle in the undergrowth sent a jolt of fear through him. He quickly realized history books hadn't prepared him for the sheer scale of everything.
Suddenly, a plaintive CY pierced the air.
It wasn't a roar, but a high-pitched, mournful sound. Alex followed the sound, cautiously pushing aside ferns, until he came to a small clearing. There, huddled at the base of a giant tree, was a young Parasaurolophus. It was smaller than he'd imagined, its distinctive crest still developing. It looked lost and frightened. It's separated from its herd, Alex murmured, noticing the creature's trembling body. He remembered reading that Parasaurolophuses communicated through a complex series of calls, using the hollow crest on their heads to amplify the sound. This one was clearly calling out, but getting no response. He scanned the surrounding area, spotting a trail of broken branches and disturbed foliage.
Maybe if we follow this way.
The next hour was a nerve-wracking trek through the prehistoric jungle. Alex, guided by the occasional distressed call of the young Parasaurolophus and the faint trail, carefully navigated the dense vegetation. He stumbled, scraped his knees, and nearly jumped out of his skin more than once. But he pressed on, driven by a strange sense of responsibility. Finally, he heard it, a chorus of Parasaurolophus calls, closer now. He pushed through a final thicket of ferns and emerged into a large clearing. There, grazing peacefully, was a large herd of the crested dinosaurs. The young Parasaurolophus let out a joyful cry and bolted towards them, its short legs carrying it surprisingly fast. It was immediately surrounded by its family, nuzzled and comforted. Alex watched, a wave of relief washing over him. As he turned to leave, something caught his eye. Lying at the base of a fern was a small, smooth stone, streaked with vibrant colors, blues, greens, and reds. It looked deliberately placed. He picked it up, turning it over in his hands. It felt warm, almost alive. A gift, Mr. Finch said, appearing silently beside him. A token of gratitude. They understand kindness, you see. Not all creatures of this era were monstrous, Alex. Many were gentle, complex, and deeply social. Alex looked back at the herd, a new understanding dawning. The dinosaurs weren't just roaring predators. They were families, communities, creatures with lives and emotions. It's beautiful, he said, clutching the stone.
Indeed.
And a reminder, Mr. Finch added, that every era, every creature has its own story. And that sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can echo through millennia. The shudder this time wasn't violent, but felt like a settling, a sinking into warmth. When Alex looked out, the lush greens of the Cretaceous had vanished, replaced by a landscape of ochre and gold. The sun beat down with an intensity he'd only read about, baking the sand until it shimmered. Before him stretched the vast expanse of the Egyptian desert, and dominating the horizon, the colossal form of a pyramid, still under construction. "Welcome to ancient Egypt," Mr. Finch announced, his voice a low murmur against the backdrop of rhythmic chanting and the scrape of stone on stone. Around 2580 BC, during the reign of the pharaoh Khufu. Alex was speechless. Unlike the prehistoric era, which felt alien and distant, this place resonated with a strange familiarity. He'd devoured countless books about Egypt, fascinated by its mythology, its art, and its mysteries. Now, to stand here, witnessing the building of one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, it was overwhelming. The Kronos Express had positioned itself on a slight rise overlooking the construction site. Thousands of workers swarmed over the pyramid, hauling massive blocks of limestone, smoothing surfaces, and meticulously placing each stone. It wasn't the brutal slave labor seen depicted in some stories. These were skilled laborers, organized and directed by foremen, working with a focused determination. It's incredible, Alex breathed, echoing his earlier awe. How did they even dot his?
Wie tut modern Machinerie?
Ingenuity, Alex, Mr. Finch replied, and sheer manpower. They utilized ramps, levers, and a deep understanding of mathematics and engineering, and a profound belief in the power of their pharaoh. They spent hours observing the construction, the rhythmic chanting and the coordinated effort, creating a mesmerizing spectacle. Alex noticed a smaller encampment a little distance from the main site, where scribes and artisans worked. Drawn by curiosity, he asked Mr. Finch if they could get closer. Of course, the conductor agreed. But remember, we are observers. We do not interfere. As they strolled closer, Alex overheard snippets of conversation carried on the hot desert wind. Most were practical, discussions of measurements, material quality, and work schedules. But then, he caught a fragment of a different conversation, spoken in hushed tones. But my heart isn't in hieroglyphs, Father. I dream of sculpting, of bringing stone to life, of capturing the beauty of the world around us. The voice belonged to a young man, barely older than Alex himself. He was speaking to an older man, presumably his father, who replied sternly, "Such fancies are for the wealthy, Amos. A scribe's duty is to record, to document. It is a noble profession, providing for your family and serving the pharaoh. Art is a distraction."
Alex fällt Abhang auf Sympathie vor the young man.
He could understand that feeling, the pull of a passion that clashed with expectations. He saw Amos return to his work, his shoulders slumped with disappointment. Later, while exploring near the artisan's camp, Alex spotted something half buried in the sand, a small, unfinished clay sculpture. It was a depiction of a falcon, its wings partially formed, its details still rough. He carefully brushed away the sand, revealing the delicate curve of a beak and the hint of a powerful eye. "Amos," Mr. Finch said softly, as if reading Alex's thoughts. He left it behind, a fragment of a dream deferred. Alex picked up the sculpture, turning it over in his hands. It felt cool and smooth, a tangible piece of a lost aspiration. "History is often written by the victors, Alex," Mr. Finch explained, his gaze fixed on the distant pyramid. "By those in power. The stories of the ordinary people, the dreamers, the artists, they are often lost to time. But they are no less important." "It's sad," Alex said quietly, "that he couldn't pursue what he loved."
Indeed.
And a reminder that even in the grandest of civilizations, individual dreams can be stifled by tradition and circumstance. Every stone in that pyramid represents not just labor, but also sacrifice, not just of physical strength, but of hopes and ambitions. He paused, then added, "Sometimes, the most poignant stories are the ones that aren't written in stone, but whispered on the wind." The transition wasn't marked by a shudder this time, but by a gentle slowing, a softening of the light. When Alex peered out the window, the harsh Egyptian sun was gone, replaced by the dappled shade of leafy maple trees. Gone too were the pyramids and the desert sands, exchanged for neat rows of suburban houses, each with a small green lawn. A wave of disorientation washed over him, quickly followed by a jolt of recognition. This is Willow Creek," he breathed, staring at a street sign. "My mom grew up here." Mr. Finch simply nodded, a knowing glint in his eye. "Indeed. A rather unexpected destination, wouldn't you agree? The Kronos Express has a peculiar habit of seeking out moments of significance." Alex's heart pounded. He knew his parents hadn't met until college, but to see their childhoods, it felt intrusive, wrong even. He wrestled with the thought. Was it ethical to observe them, to witness moments they'd never know he'd seen? "Mr. Finch," he began hesitantly, "is it okay for us to be here? Shouldn't we just observe from a distance?" The conductor smiled, a gentle, reassuring expression. "The train doesn't arrive at random, Alex. It doesn't allow random arrivals. This moment, this place, holds a key. As for observing, you are a historian at heart. Observation is your craft."
Just remember, like all things, Therese a balance. A respektfull Distanz.
No interference. They disembarked, the train fading into a shimmering haze that blended seamlessly with the late afternoon light. Alex found himself on a quiet residential street, the air filled with the sounds of children's laughter and the distant whir of lawnmowers. He walked slowly, his gaze sweeping across the houses, searching. Then, he saw them. 2 children, no older than 10, were arguing near a sprawling oak tree in someone's front yard. A girl with bright red ribbons in her hair, fiercely defending a collection of brightly colored marbles. And a boy, slightly taller, with a mop of brown hair falling into his eyes, looking crestfallen. It was his mother and father. Younger, smaller, but undeniably them. "It's not fair, Sarah." The boy, his father, protested, his voice cracking with frustration.
You promiset vet play vissem togeter.
"Now you're saying I can't use the blue one because I'm too rough." "You are too rough, David," his mother retorted, clutching the marbles tightly.
You always break things.
"I don't want my special marbles getting chipped." Alex watched, transfixed, as the argument escalated. He'd always known his mother was meticulous, careful, a little bit of a perfectionist. And his father, while kind and gentle, often seemed resigned, a little bit hesitant. He'd never understood why. Now, he was witnessing the roots of those traits, budding in the soil of childhood disappointment. "But it's just a game," his father pleaded. "I just wanted to build a cool marble run." "Well, you can build it with the ones I let you have," his mother snapped, turning her back on him. The boy stood there for a moment, his shoulders slumping. Then, he quietly turned and walked away, kicking a small stone down the sidewalk. Alex felt a sharp pang of sympathy. It wasn't just about the marbles. It was about feeling excluded, about having his creativity stifled. As Alex stood there, a small, faded photograph fluttered to his feet, caught by a gentle breeze. He picked it up. It was a picture of his parents, the same age as the children he'd just observed, standing awkwardly side by side, their faces slightly blurred. His mother was holding a small bouquet of wildflowers, and his father was clutching a half-finished wooden airplane. They weren't smiling at each other, but looking in different directions. "A memento," Mr. Finch said quietly, appearing at his side. "A captured moment, lost to time until now." It seems young David's passion for building was evident even then, while Sarah valued her possessions and order. Alex looked at the photograph, then back at the spot where his young parents had argued. He finally understood. The seeds of their personalities, their strengths, and their vulnerabilities, had been sown here, in this quiet suburban neighborhood, decades ago. It's amazing," Alex whispered, clutching the photograph. "To see them like this. To understand." Mr. Finch placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "The past isn't just dates and battles, Alex. It's the sum of countless small moments, the whispered dreams, the shared disappointments. It's the foundation upon which we build our lives." The scent of wood smoke and roasting meat filled the air as the Kronos Express lurched to a halt. Alex pressed his face against the cool glass, peering out at a bustling medieval castle courtyard. Knights in shining armor practiced swordsmanship, while vendors hawked their wares and children chased pigeons. He'd barely had time to absorb the sights of Willow Creek before being whisked away again. "Welcome to Castle Blackwood, 1348, Mr. Finch announced, his voice barely audible above the din. "A time of chivalry, hardship, and surprisingly, excellent pastries." This time, Alex wasn't overwhelmed with fear, but with a growing sense of responsibility. He carefully tucked the faded photograph of his parents into his satchel, alongside the clay sculpture from Egypt and the smooth, colorful stone from the prehistoric era. His collection was growing, each object a tangible link to a forgotten life, a silent story waiting to be told. He spent the afternoon observing the castle inhabitants. He watched a young blacksmith tirelessly hammering at a piece of metal, his brow furrowed in concentration. He listened to a minstrel singing ballads of bravery and loss. And he noticed a young woman, Elara, tending a small herb garden, her movements gentle and precise. It was from her he received his offering, a single, dried lavender sprig, carefully tied with a piece of twine. She'd explained it was grown from seeds her mother brought over from France, a tiny piece of home in a harsh world. The next stop was a dusty Wild West town, tumbleweeds rolling through the streets. He collected a tarnished harmonica from a lonely cowboy, a man who'd lost his ranch but refused to lose his spirit. Then, a delicate porcelain teacup from a lavish Victorian tea party, gifted by a young lady who defied societal expectations to become a botanist. Each item came with a story, a glimpse into a life lived fully, despite its challenges. Back on the train, Alex spread his collection across the plush velvet seats. He pulled out his notebook, attempting to meticulously document each story, each detail. He wrote about Elara's determination to preserve beauty in a world of conflict, the cowboy's unwavering hope, the botanist's quiet rebellion. But the words felt inadequate, unable to capture the full weight of their experiences. "It's a lot," he admitted to Mr. Finch, running a hand through his hair. "I want to remember everything, to do justice to their stories, but it feels impossible. And the more I collect, the heavier it feels. Like I'm carrying their burdens with them." Mr. Finch chuckled softly. "That, Alex, is the price of passage. Not a monetary cost, but an emotional one. You are becoming a vessel for these lost moments, a keeper of memories. It is a weighty responsibility indeed." "But what's the point?" Alex asked, frustration creeping into his voice. "What good is it to collect these stories if they just sit here in my notebook, unseen and unheard?" The conductor paused, his gaze distant. "The Kronos Express isn't merely about collecting, Alex. It's about preserving. About ensuring that these moments, these lives, aren't completely forgotten. Time, you see, has a way of smoothing over the edges, of erasing the details. The train exists to safeguard against that erosion." He continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "I've been guiding passengers like yourself for centuries. Each one touched by the echoes of the past, each one carrying a piece of it forward. It's a lonely task, but a vital one. Before you, there was a woman who collected songs, a man who gathered lost letters. We are all connected by this shared purpose." Alex stared at the conductor, suddenly seeing him not just as a kindly guide, but as something more.
"A guardian of forgotten histories, a silent protector of lost souls."
"But why me?" he asked, his voice barely a breath. "Because you listen, Alex," Mr. Finch replied, a warm smile gracing his lips.
"You see the humanity in every story.
And that, my boy, is a rare and precious gift." As the train rattled onward, Alex looked at his collection with new eyes. He wasn't just collecting objects, he was collecting fragments of lives, pieces of the human story. And he knew, with a growing certainty, that he couldn't simply hold on to them. He had to share them. He had to let them breathe, let them live again in the hearts and minds of others. The weight hadn't disappeared, but it had shifted. It was no longer a burden, but a promise. The train rattled, but not with its usual rhythmic energy. It felt strained, each lurch accompanied by a flicker of the gas lamps and a disconcerting groan of metal. Alex glanced out the window, but the landscape was blurring, less a defined scene and more a wash of muted colors. "Is everything all right, Mr. Finch?" he asked, a knot forming in his stomach. The conductor, usually so composed, was examining the intricate gears of a nearby clockwork mechanism with a worried frown. "Not quite, Alex.
"The Kronos Express. She's losing power."
"Losing power? But how?" Mr. Finch sighed, running a hand through his silver hair. "The train operates on a principle of balance, you see. For every story we preserve, a corresponding offering is required.
A treat, if you will."
You've been collecting these beautiful mementos, these echoes of lives lived, but the train needs more than just objects.
Alex mind raced back to the lavender sprig, the harmonica, the teacup, the stone, the sculpture, the photograph.
"You mean, it wants the objects themselves? I can give them back." He started gathering his collection, a panicked energy fueling his movements. "No, Alex," Mr. Finch said gently, stopping him. "That's not what I meant.
The train does and desire possession.
It cherishes the stories represented by these items, but it requires something more personal. Something of equal value to the moments you've collected."
Equal value.
But what could possibly be equal to a life, to a dream, to a memory. Alex felt a cold dread creeping over him.
Something precious to you, Alex. Something you hold dear.
The train seeks a sacrifice, not of material worth, but of the heart. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Alex stared at his collection, now feeling like a collection of weights dragging him down. He thought of his grandfather's worn leather-bound books, filled with fantastical tales. He thought of his model airplanes, painstakingly assembled with his grandfather's guidance. He thought of the small, smooth stone his grandfather had given him on his 10th birthday, telling him it held the strength of the mountains. But none of it felt right. Those were possessions, cherished, yes, but not imbued with the same weight as the stories he'd been entrusted with. The blacksmith's unwavering focus, Elara's quiet resilience, the cowboy's enduring hope, the botanist's courageous spirit, those were worth more than all his belongings combined. The train lurched violently, throwing Alex against the window. The lamps flickered again, threatening to extinguish completely. "We're losing time, Alex," Mr. Finch said, his voice urgent. "The train won't be able to maintain its course much longer." Alex closed his eyes, his mind swirling with desperation. He thought of the faces he'd glimpsed in the past, the lives he'd briefly touched. He felt a strange connection to them, a sense of responsibility that went beyond simply preserving their stories. He'd witnessed their struggles, their triumphs, their vulnerabilities. He'd felt their humanity. And then, a painful realization dawned on him. He knew what he had to do. He reached into his satchel, not for an object, but for his notebook. The one filled with his meticulous, yet inadequate attempts to capture the essence of each story. The notebook his grandfather had gifted him, encouraging him to document his own adventures, to become a storyteller himself. It wasn't the notebook itself that held the value, but what it represented, his budding passion, his grandfather's legacy, his own voice. "I think I know what I have to give," he said, his voice trembling. He opened the notebook to the first page, the one dedicated to his grandfather, and began to read. He read aloud the stories he'd collected, not as a mere recitation of facts, but as a heartfelt tribute to the people who had lived them. He spoke of Elara's garden, the cowboy's song, the botanist's defiance, the blacksmith's craft. He poured his heart and soul into each retelling, imbuing the words with the emotion he'd felt while observing these lives. As he spoke, a faint warmth began to emanate from the train. The flickering lamps steadied, and the groaning of the gears subsided. The blurring landscape outside the window began to sharpen, regaining its clarity. The train was responding. He continued to tell the stories, his voice growing stronger with each passing moment. He wasn't just sharing information, he was breathing life back into these forgotten moments, ensuring that they wouldn't fade into oblivion. He was offering not an object, but a part of himself, his time, his energy, his voice. Finally he finished, his throat raw and his heart pounding. A profound silence descended upon the train, broken only by the rhythmic chugging of the engine. Mr. Finch was watching him, his eyes filled with a quiet understanding. "You understand now, don't you, Alex?" he said softly. "The true price of passage isn't about what you give up, but how you give it. It's about sharing the stories, keeping the memories alive. It's about ensuring that the past continues to resonate in the present." The warmth spreading through the Kronos Express wasn't just mechanical, it felt hopeful. Alex, still catching his breath from recounting the tales, watched as the train's interior glowed with a renewed luminescence. The intricate gears, previously grinding and protesting, now turned with a smooth, almost musical rhythm. He'd offered his stories, his retelling, and the train had responded. Mr. Finch, who had been a silent observer during Alex's recitation, finally broke the silence. A faint smile played on his lips, a smile that seemed to hold centuries of untold tales.
"Remarkable, Alex.
Truly remarkable. You've grasped a truth many spend a lifetime seeking." "But it was just stories," Alex stammered, still unsure if he'd done enough.
"I didn't give anything real."
Mr. Finch chuckled, a warm, resonant sound.
"Oh, but you did, my boy.
You gave them voice. You gave them life again. These moments, these people. They existed, they breathed, they felt. But time, as you've seen, has a way of silencing even the most vibrant echoes. You remembered. You honored. And in doing so, you've given them a gift far greater than any object. He paused, his gaze drifting towards the window, as if looking at scenes only he could see. I've been tending to this train for a long while, Alex. Longer than you can imagine. Seen countless travelers come and go, each with their own burdens and discoveries. The Kronos Express isn't merely a vehicle for time travel, it's a repository of memory.
Sangstuari vor the forgotten.
Alex was captivated. He'd always sensed there was more to Mr. Finch than met the eye. You've been doing this for a long time? Mr. Finch offered a wistful smile. Let's just say I've witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the blossoming and withering of civilizations. I've seen heartbreak and heroism, joy and despair. It's a heavy responsibility, being a guardian of lost moments. He tapped a finger against the glass of a nearby clock. But a necessary one. Because without memory, what are we? Just fleeting shadows, destined to vanish without a trace.
A sudden wave of peace washed over Alex.
The frantic anxiety that had gripped him moments before dissolved, replaced by a quiet sense of fulfillment. He no longer felt the need to possess the stories, to hold onto the objects as tangible proof of his journey. He understood now that the true value lay in sharing them, in allowing their lessons to resonate with others. It's strange, Alex said, looking at his now empty satchel. I thought I was collecting things for myself, but I think I was collecting them for everyone. Precisely, Mr. Finch said, his eyes twinkling. And now, you have a gift to offer the world. A gift far more precious than any treasure.
The gift of storytelling.
He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The past isn't just something to be studied, Alex. It's something to be lived through stories. It's a conversation between generations. The train continued to gather momentum, the rhythmic chugging growing stronger and more confident. Alex felt a lightness he hadn't experienced since his grandfather was still here, sharing his own tales. He realized that while he missed his grandfather terribly, his legacy wasn't just in the memories he'd left behind, but in the spark he'd ignited within Alex, the desire to connect, to understand, and to share the human experience. He wasn't just a boy who loved history anymore. He was a vessel for those stories, a link to those who came before. The Kronos Express shuddered one last time, a gentle rocking motion that signaled its final approach. Through the grimy windows of the abandoned station, Alex could make out the familiar silhouette of his town, bathed in the soft glow of early morning. It wasn't midnight anymore. He'd returned. Mr. Finch offered a reassuring nod.
Here we are, Alex. Back where you belong.
As the train doors hissed open, a rush of cool, damp air filled the carriage. It smelled of pine needles and wet earth, a scent that instantly grounded him. He stepped onto the platform, his legs feeling strangely unsteady after his journey through time. The station was exactly as he remembered it: crumbling brickwork, overgrown weeds, and a palpable sense of forgotten history. But now, it felt different. It felt charged with possibility. He turned to thank Mr. Finch, but the conductor was already fading, becoming translucent like a dream. Wait! Alex called out, Will I ever see the train again? Mr. Finch smiled, a sad yet hopeful expression. The Kronos Express appears to those who need it most, Alex. To those who yearn to understand the echoes of the past. Keep listening, keep learning, keep sharing. And perhaps one day, our paths will cross again. Then, with a final shimmer, he was gone. The train itself followed, dissolving into the morning mist until nothing remained but the faintest scent of coal smoke and a lingering warmth in the air. Alex stood for a moment, clutching the faded photograph he'd taken of his parents as children. It wasn't an object he'd collected in the traditional sense, but it represented a story unlocked, a connection forged. He carefully tucked it into his pocket. The walk home was filled with a quiet energy. Everything seemed brighter, sharper, imbued with a newfound significance. He noticed the weathered stones of the old church, the intricate carvings on the town hall, the faces of the people he passed, all carrying their own untold stories. His mother was already in the kitchen, humming as she made breakfast. The aroma of pancakes filled the air. "Alex, you're back." I was starting to worry. "I just took a walk," he mumbled, still hesitant to reveal the truth. He wasn't sure how she'd react. But then he saw his father reading the newspaper, a familiar furrow in his brow. Alex remembered witnessing his father's childhood struggle with a friend, a misunderstanding that had clearly left a mark. He felt a surge of empathy, a deeper understanding of the man he thought he knew so well. "Actually," Alex began, taking a deep breath,
"I have a story to tell you."
And so he did. He didn't tell them about the train, not yet. Instead, he started with the story of the young scribe in ancient Egypt, a boy who dreamed of art but was bound by duty. He described the pyramids, the bustling city, and the quiet frustration of a forgotten talent. His parents listened, captivated. His mother's humming ceased, and his father lowered his newspaper. When he finished, a comfortable silence settled over the kitchen. "That's a beautiful story, Alex," his mother said softly. "Where did you hear it?" "I read it in a book," he replied, a small smile playing on his lips. It wasn't a complete lie. The book was just a little different than most. That afternoon, Alex found himself at the local library, surrounded by towering shelves of books. He wasn't just reading about history anymore. He was searching for it, eager to corroborate the details of his journeys, to understand the context of the stories he'd been entrusted with. He devoured books on dinosaurs, ancient Egypt, medieval castles, and the Wild West, his mind buzzing with newfound knowledge. Days turned into weeks, and Alex continued to share his stories, weaving them into everyday conversations. He told his friends about the resilience of the people he'd met, the importance of courage, and the beauty of different cultures. He became known as the storyteller among his classmates, and he relished the role. One evening, as dusk settled over the town, Alex found himself drawn back to the abandoned station. He stood on the platform, gazing into the darkness, a sense of peace washing over him. The station was quiet, still, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. And then, he saw her. A young girl, no older than 7 or 8, stood at the edge of the tracks, her eyes wide with curiosity, staring towards the overgrown railway line. She held a worn copy of a history book in her hands, and her gaze was fixed on the spot where the Kronos Express had once stood. Alex smiled, a knowing glint in his eyes. The stories, he realized, would continue. The train might be gone, but the journey had just begun.